Discover the Our MedTech Lives podcast, where industry experts share their career stories, key achievements, and insights into overcoming challenges in the MedTech field. Hosted by Zilko Rima and Kash Ikram.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Our MedTech Lives. Today we're absolutely delighted to have Christian Espinosa with us. He's the CEO and founder of Blue Goat Cyber. This is a company that is focused on cybersecurity in medical devices and helps companies ensure that their products are cyber secure. So without any further ado, welcome Christian.
Thank you for having me on the show. I love the title of
Welcome.
MedTech Lives. I love the title of your show. It's cool. It almost sounds like a soap opera, but it's really not.
Yes,
It's like Days of Our Lives, right?
but sometimes there's as much drama, I think.
That's the best opening ever. It's a soap opera today. Let's add a little cyber to it.
There we go.
Let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us something about yourself and your amazing background.
Yeah, from myself, I grew up really poor in Arkansas, small town in a small state, really, and very chaotic childhood. My mother was addicted to pain meds and very chaotic. So I joined the military. I got a scholarship to the Air Force Academy, which is the opposite of my childhood. Very strict, very structured, very safe environment. And then I worked for the Department of Homeland Security and DOD, worked for a while in the U.S. military and as a contractor. And my next job was doing aircraft penetration testing. So I was hired to make sure somebody couldn't hack into a commercial airplane and crash the plane, because back, maybe like 12 years ago, there was some theories that somebody could plug a USB stick or the laptop into the in-flight entertainment system and take over the plane and fly.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was in charge of making sure that didn't happen.
Okay.
After a while of working for other people, I finally came to the conclusion that I wanted to work for myself and be an entrepreneur. So I formed my own company in 2014, my first cybersecurity company. I sold that in 2020 to a publicly traded company. And then shortly thereafter, a couple years after, I formed Blue Goat Cyber.
But you must have, did you study cyber and computers and that at school? Did you learn that at the Air Force?
I joined the military to fly jets, but in the 2 years before I graduated, they cut all the pilot slots. So I majored in engineering in the Air Force, and my secondary career was communications, since I didn't get a pilot slot. And within communications, I did information assurance, was like what they used to call it before they called it cybersecurity. So my job was to make sure our other nation states or adversaries couldn't get into government classified networks.
Okay. Fantastic. Now, I've met a lot of people in my career who started in the military and then found their way into MedTech. I find that fascinating. So if you're in the military, the MedTech is a very good place to go work, I think. And the people really appreciate the knowledge and the way of working. So you did various jobs working in cyber, but you were a cybersecurity consultant at some point, right?
Yeah, after I got out of like the 9-to-5 job, before I formed my first company, I did solopreneur work. So I traveled the world teaching cybersecurity courses. I've probably taught 150, maybe 200 courses around the world. And I did penetration testing, which is trying to hack into things. People hire me to try to break into their environment, either technically, like across the internet, or physically, like I try to sneak in their office and plant a device or get somebody to divulge some secret information. Yeah,
that
so I
sounds
did
like
that,
fun.
and then I transitioned to my first company. That was solopreneur work or freelance before 2014. And then in 2014, I thought, what's the next way for me to up-level myself, force myself to grow and contribute more to society? So I formed my first business then and grew that one and sold it in 2020.
Which company was this? Was this?
That was called Alpine Security.
Okay.
Yeah, I sold that in 2020 to CISO Global. It's a publicly traded company. And made a lot of mistakes with that whole sell transaction, made a lot of mistakes or paid the dumb tax with my first company, as they say. And then when I was with the parent company, I developed 6 blood clots in my left leg and almost died. So thanks to a medical device, a Doppler ultrasound, it was able to quickly diagnose me.
What
Literally the
was
day
this?
before, I had done like 120 burpees. I was training for an Ironman triathlon, so I was in like
There
really
you
good
go.
shape. I didn't think people that
Fitness
were in
will
great
always kill you,
shape
I
got blood
tell you.
clots. What's that?
Fitness will always kill you.
Is that what it is?
Was this a moment where you thought that you want to have a medical device cybersecurity company? Or what was the moment where you decided this deserves a dedicated firm like now, Blue Goat Cyber?
With my first cybersecurity company, we had some medical device cybersecurity contracts. So we did
Okay.
medical device cybersecurity, but it was probably 20% or maybe 15% of my overall business. It wasn't like the focus. So after I got the blood clots, I was told I couldn't do anything I used to do. I couldn't run, I couldn't bike, I couldn't hike, I couldn't travel. I could just sit around and take blood thinners basically. So it took me a while to recover physically because I could barely stand up. My leg hurt so bad. And then mentally and emotionally from that experience, because I went from kind of living life at large to being shrunk down to almost doing nothing I like to do, but sit around, which I don't like to sit around. I'm very, I like to be doing things. So one day I decided I was going to reclaim my health. So I stopped taking the blood thinners. I was like threw them across the room, went and got every possible test on my blood, went and got another Doppler ultrasound, and nobody could find anything that contributed to the blood clot. So that one decision gave me the confidence to like reclaim my life and take more of an active role versus listen to a doctor I saw like for 15 minutes. So after that, I decided to form Blue Goat Cyber. I thought, what is the meaning in everything I just went through? And I decided that I already had the experience from 2014 with medical devices.
Yes.
Almost died, but thanks to a medical device, I'm here. So maybe this is the universe speaking to me saying, maybe you should focus on medical devices and take the knowledge you had. So that's why I formed Blue Goat Cyber, to focus specifically on MedTech, because if it wasn't for a medical device, I probably wouldn't be here.
So I just want to rewind a bit. The previous company that you sold, where you paid your dumb tax that you said, what was the motivation for selling it, right? Because it must have been going well. So what made you say, okay, now I'm going to sell this company? I'm intrigued by that.
The motivation was COVID. About 40%, I mentioned 15% or so was medical device cybersecurity. About 40% of our revenue was in-person cybersecurity training. So I took what I did freelance and hired other people, and we grew that and the company. But when COVID happened, we couldn't do anything in person. So I lost 40% of my revenue. And at the same time, these things were happening. I had buyers approaching me saying, we want to buy your company. So I was in kind of a dire place because, I don't know, dire, I could have made it out, I'm sure, but 40% revenue loss with no foreseeable way to recuperate that revenue put me a little bit in a uncomfortable position where I thought, okay, maybe I should consider these offers to sell the company. And then ironically, this is a story I told myself, the company that bought mine, its name before they rebranded to CISO Global or CISO Global was called Cerberus. Cerberus is a 3-headed dog that guards the gates of hell.
Yes.
In my military career in the Air Force Academy, my squadron is called Cerberus, and I have a patent on a cyber attack simulator called Cerberus. Right. So I thought, maybe this is synchronicity and this is what I should do. So I did it, even though there were some red flags, and it was a mistake, but it got me to where I am today. Maybe
so did you?
It's also a stepping stone, right?
Yeah.
Now we need to know why this one is Blue Goat. Then.
Yeah. Did you bump into a blue goat on one of your Ironman runs, or how did that happen?
Well, part of what I like to do is climb mountains. I've done 2 of the 7 summits, the highest mountain on each continent. And when I climb mountains, I always see goats. Goats are always trying to get to the next level. They're very agile, very persistent, a little bit stubborn. And I thought that would be a good quality for a company. And then I also find the color of the sky in the mountains against the snow on the hills and the mountainside very calming.
I thought they were just cold, but okay, that's much better.
It is pretty cold for sure. I've been very cold before.
Cool. Now, people may be wondering. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Silk.
I mean, maybe we should tell where we met first, right? We met at the MedTech World in Malta.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in the presentation, listening to your wife, Melissa, who's also part of Blue Goat Cyber. And honestly, this is where I had the aha moment, because I always thought when talking about cybersecurity, I thought about data safety. But Melissa said the number one reason for cybersecurity in MedTech is patient safety. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, and the thought you had that's about data is pretty common still. That's part of Blue Goat's mission, is to raise the awareness and change the lens in which people are seeing cybersecurity of medical devices. But the primary driver is patient safety. We have to look at if somebody or malicious software, it could be intentional or unintentional, like compromises a device. How can this device harm or kill a patient? If it is a surgical robot performing surgery in your spine, it gets malicious software on it, it potentially paralyzes somebody. If it's an in vitro diagnostic system used to treat sepsis and there's a delay and the device can't spit out a result, then somebody could die from sepsis. So we have to look at through that lens. The data certainly is important, but it's really secondary. I mean, imagine if you have a defibrillator and these have been recalled and compromised, and somebody has wirelessly connected to it and they're shocking you to death while somebody's at the same time stealing your sensitive health records. Which one do you care about first, right? Probably being shocked to death. You can recover from your data being stolen. You can't recover from death, at least not yet.
There's so many products now that are cyber. So insulin pumps, ventilators, monitors in the ICU. People in the ICU, you can be hooked up to a device that's automatically injecting drugs at a certain rate into you, right? Pacemakers need to be able to do a difference in the way your heart is beating and be able to shock you or to repace your heart, right? What if it starts to shock you when you don't need it, or speed up or slow down your heart?
And like all these scenarios, these devices wear, and there's some way to connect to that device, which makes it very vulnerable.
Exactly.
This sounds also super scary. I mean, imagine someone is listening to this podcast and has maybe a defibrillator or a pacemaker. Does this person needs to be scared when walking around that someone could manipulate this device?
I don't know if they need to be scared. I think they need to be aware. I mean, pacemakers and defibrillators have been recalled, which puts a patient in a interesting scenario. Do they get something that's implanted in their body taken out because there's risk with that, or do they accept the risk that somebody may be able to connect to it wirelessly and do something malicious? So I think we have to educate the patients about the risks so they can make an informed decision. And the same thing with a healthcare delivery organization. If I had the choice between this insulin pump and this one pump A has more vulnerabilities than pump B, maybe I should choose pump B, even though it costs a little more money, but I know it's more secure. And we're heading that direction more.
That's
But
fascinating.
for patients, where do they find this information? I wasn't aware of it because it never affected my life. But do they find this information somewhere that they can make the decision between devices?
Proactively, they can find it on the labeling of the device now. Medical devices now have to have disclosures of what cybersecurity controls have been put in place, what type of encryption, what type of authentication. So this is all through the labeling scheme, but this requires the patient to understand the label and what it says, right? Like what TLS 1.3 means. And that's a whole different scenario. The second is the reactive response, which is up to the manufacturers to have a plan. If there is a new vulnerability discovered with something already fielded, they have to notify the healthcare delivery organization and the patients and have a course of action that makes sense to minimize the risk to them. And ultimately, like with the defibrillator example, the decision is up to the patient to have it removed and replaced, or there may be a way to update the firmware remotely or wirelessly on the device, or the patient just may decide to say, I'm going to leave it in because I don't want to have surgery again.
Yeah. So normally the people who we look to keep us safe in these situations is like the FDA or the EU MDR, for example. Are they the ones that draw the labeling? But also I would say most patients don't get to see the IFU or the label of the product. Let's say it's a energy generator that was used during surgery. That manual is sitting somewhere on somebody's shelf. It's not presented to the patient before they have a case. Or even if you had a pacemaker implanted, I'm not sure in Europe they would give you the IFU on your way out the door, right? So you never see that. So my question is, what role is the FDA and the governing bodies around the world playing in this?
Well, they are driving the train, this push for transparency and labeling, because with cybersecurity, nobody will do anything about it unless there's some sort of mandate or gate. And right now, the mandate and gate is your device will not pass MDR rules and restrictions or FDA unless it meets all these requirements. So that forces the manufacturer to do this. The scenario you mentioned about if someone is in a hospital or healthcare delivery organization and they use a piece of equipment there, that typically labeling is for the purpose of the healthcare delivery organization themselves. But if I'm a patient and I have a device like a bronchial decongestion system or a COPD that I take home and I'm the one using it every day, I should have the right to look at what's in that device and may have to hook this device up to my own Wi-Fi network so it can then connect to something on the cloud. So I'm exposing it to my own internal home environment as well. So maybe I should make an educated decision about that. Yes.
And these devices are starting to be more and more connected because of the data, right? The evolution we're going through is that in the past, a surgeon, for example, would perform a procedure, write a note on what he did, and that would go as a piece of paper in the files. But what we're rapidly moving to is a full record of what happened to you in the hospital, and that information has been sent from devices to a central database, which is then transcribing that information electronically into your record, right? So more and more of these devices are starting to be connected to the patient record system. And that's where this cyber comes in.
That's where it comes in. It also comes in if there's any type of interface on the device, which is one of the misconceptions. People think, well, my device doesn't connect to the internet. But if your device has a USB port that's exposed or Bluetooth low emissions, or it's implantable with a wireless protocol like MedRadio, it has a way to connect to it, which is ultimately what makes it a cyber device, which means it's open to risk because of that connection, which means it has to go through the cyber scrutiny and all the requirements for cybersecurity.
So when we met at this startup event, you emphasized that building cybersecurity should be built in from the start. Do you have a real world example, if possible, of what happens when cybersecurity is treated as a late stage activity?
Unfortunately, that happens all the time. So clients, there are some proactive clients that come to us when they're still designing the product, because ideally cybersecurity is designed into the product. That's actually the requirement of the regulatory bodies, is designed in the product, because bolted on cybersecurity is never as effective. What typically happens though, there's two use cases. One, somebody submits their package for, let's say, FDA clearance in the United States. They sort of did a little bit of cybersecurity, or they forgot all about it. They get a rejection letter from the FDA. Then that client contacts us saying, we got this rejection letter. We have 180 days to respond to it. Can you help us with cybersecurity? And we say, we can help. What have you done? They're like, so we start doing testing. We start doing as much as we can. They cannot fix it in 180 days because they have things they have to redesign, which delays their time to market. It costs them more money. They have to go back and ask their investors for more money. And that's a major problem. It's major frustrating, especially from my perspective when, as an entrepreneur, I also see how great these technologies are and how they can really help somebody in need once they're on the market. It's delaying that time that somebody can use this device to make their life better. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is people think cybersecurity is a point in time study, sort of like sterility or biocompatibility. So they'll say, okay, we're going to do cybersecurity about 2 months before our submission to MDR, let's say. And that's the first time they think about cybersecurity. It's basically the same problem. They come to us 2 months before. We do a test, a penetration test. We try to hack in the device. We often find thousands of things they need to fix. They cannot fix those things within 2 months. And often those things require a redesign. So again, their time to market is delayed. It costs them more money. Investors are frustrated. Patient that actually needs this device cannot get access to the device because it's delayed. Often, not often, I would say maybe 10% of the time or 5% of the time, some of these companies just decide to abandon the project because of all these delays due to cybersecurity. So I like to say, because our initial design consulting service costs around $5,000, if you spend $5,000 early on, it can save you $500,000 later on and save you a lot of headache, a lot of frustration, a lot of everything, really. So I'm advocating people do this early on. And we are trying to increase the awareness that cybersecurity, if you do it early on, is actually way more cost effective. It will be a discriminator because healthcare delivery organizations are looking for this, not just the FDA, not just EU MDR. They're looking for cybersecurity as well before they put this device on their environment.
Yeah, stitching time saves nine.
FDA stuff. We just learned recently that FDA made it easier for wearables, but wearables have a lot of data involved. Does it affect cyber safety as well, or is it still the same requirement as before?
This is kind of a gray area where, like wearables and clinical decision support systems, we're saying a physician is not making a diagnosis or a recommended course of treatment based on data from this device. So if that's the area, then yeah, we're saying this device doesn't have to have as much scrutiny because nobody is taking the data as is and making a decision, or it's a course of treatment. There's a human interpreting it. And a lot of manufacturers today that we have worked with are trying to go the route because it's much easier as a quote wearable or clinical decision support system to get approved because you don't have to go through all the cybersecurity requirements, get it on the market, and then later try to add a feature that makes it a medical device. And then you have to go through all the cybersecurity. But that brings up the same scenario though. If your core functionality wasn't designed with cybersecurity, then you later add a feature, you still have to go back and redesign things potentially. So as a strategy, I think it's a little bit muddied because are we making decisions based on the data a wearable is telling us? Is the doctor actually listening to the instructions for use that this is just data to consider, or are they taking the data as is and actually recommending a course of treatment, right? So it's not longer just something supporting your decision, it's something guiding your decision and maybe guiding your course of treatment. So that's why I say it's a very gray area. And I don't think we've done a good job clearing the ambiguity or seeking clarity on this specific topic.
Clearly, the cyber internet is moving so fast, and our industry has not been known for moving fast, right? Are we keeping up with the innovations that are occurring that hackers are creating?
Well, it's compared apples to oranges, I guess, right? MedTech is a highly regulated industry because of patient safety. Silicon Valley, if I'm coming up with a new AI tool that I can throw it in the cloud, you can do it in a couple months. With MedTech, I think the average time is seven years and $35 million to bring a product to market, US dollars. So in 7 years, can things definitely change from a cybersecurity perspective? Yes. And that's why cybersecurity needs to be designed in, but it also is an iterative thing. As you're developing the product, you constantly need to be looking at the cybersecurity, what's changed, what new vulnerabilities, the software bill of materials or any software you borrow, like if those have vulnerabilities. It's a very dynamic exercise. It's not that point in time exercise like a sterility study, like I mentioned. So it requires people to be thinking about it that way. It's not a one and done. It's never a one and done. And just because someone in Silicon Valley can throw something up in the cloud in 4 months to get some funding, that's not a regulated industry like MedTech. Expect to take 7 years to get your product to market. I'm sure some are less and some are more, but it's a long game, a lot of regulations, a lot of things to follow, and it takes a long time.
Cash and I, we have been almost all the times in sales and marketing. And I don't know, I think there's a delay. Sorry.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. So Cash and I, we have been in sales and marketing in MedTech. And for us, I don't know you, Cash, but for me, it has always been something for IT and regulatory, maybe. Is this something people, leaders in sales and marketing should care of? Or can we leave it with our colleagues?
I think marketing should absolutely care about the cybersecurity because marketing needs to have a claim that can be substantiated. So if we're going to claim our device from a marketing lens has these aspects of cybersecurity into it because the healthcare delivery organization that we're selling to wants to see that, then we need to actually have traceability that those things were built into the product. Because, I mean, marketing is a key aspect of selling the devices, right? So we have to have the right transparency from what has been done to what is being marketed. And I think that is a gap that I've seen a lot where marketing claims it does X, Y, and Z, and it has these security controls, but then you pull back the curtain and those things don't actually exist. And then you have an incident later on where the healthcare delivery organization that bought your device based on these marketing claims realized that it wasn't secure because somebody actually compromised it, which diminishes your brand and a few other things. And it's also a discriminator because a lot of people think, I've made it through the MDR, I'm good to go. But if you read the news every day, another healthcare organization has a data breach. So because of that, they're trying to get better, which means they keep raising the bar on what's required for a new device to get put in their environment. So from a marketing perspective and a discriminating perspective, if your device is more secure than this device and meets the requirements for the healthcare delivery organization, you will probably have more success selling to that environment.
So as a sales and marketing person learning more about cybersecurity, perhaps you can help me understand what are SBOMs and why are regulators focused on them and why are they so important?
So an SBOM is a software bill of materials. Software developers don't write all the software for a product. They borrow other pieces of software called third-party libraries and other pieces of software like they may not even know where they got it. They could have just copied and pasted from the internet, and they put that into their code. And that code consists of all those things. It's like if you have a pizza and you buy a frozen pizza, on the back of the box, it'll tell you all the ingredients. That's like the software bill of materials, except the software bill of material goes one step further and tells you where they came from. You need that traceability. So the reason that's important, there's really a couple reasons. One is it forces the company that is developing the product, the software developers, to actually understand where all the code that went into their product came from. So we borrowed version 1.3 of this authentication software. And this piece of code, we don't even know where it's come from. And that's called SOUP, or software of unknown provenance, because software developers are notorious for copying code off the internet. If they can't figure out how to do something, they find someone else that did it, copied it, and just pasted it into their code. So we have to have this traceability. And then once we have it, we know, okay, this 1.3 version of this open source code we borrowed for authentication actually has vulnerabilities. So we need to update that to version 1.4 as an example. This all ties into that transparency and labeling we were talking about. So if I am the healthcare delivery organization and I buy this product, I should be able to see all the third-party open source pieces of code, the ingredients basically that make up that product. Because I may not want a product that has this particular ingredient or piece of software because I know that one has a major vulnerability, or I know it has a history of being exploited. So I can make a better and more informed decision before I procure that product.
And I mean, we always talk now about cybersecurity, which sounds nice, right? But when we started in MedTech more than 25 years ago, we also had IT testing, enterprise security testing. We had to do a lot of tests, like which email not to accept and whatever. How is this? You mentioned several times penetration testing. How is this different today from the traditional testing?
It's very different. As I mentioned, MedTech is highly regulated. The risk is very real. It's not just stolen data, which typically is traditional cybersecurity is about stolen data. We're talking about patient lives. We're also talking about products, not just software in a cloud. So there's a number of things that make it different. And because it's highly regulated, the FDA, MDR, they expect very precise things to be tested. So the guardrails, the requirements are very stringent versus traditional cybersecurity. And even something as simple as how you calculate risk in MedTech from a cybersecurity perspective looks at exploitability instead of probability. There's a lot of nuances, but the bottom line is what we've seen is a lot of MedTech companies that are manufacturing a product will choose a traditional penetration testing company to do their testing of their medical device. And that traditional company applies traditional penetration testing methodologies and tools and everything else to the device. They give you a traditional report. It doesn't pass the scrutiny of the FDA or MDR and results in a deficiency letter. Then they have to come to a firm like mine that actually understands testing in this industry. Because again, the lens we looked at in IT and general testing is typically data protection. The lens we talked about here is patient safety. So if you're testing for data protection versus patient safety, it's a very different type of testing also.
Okay.
I'm fascinated to know the type of companies that you provide your service for. Are we talking about, is it mainly smaller startup companies, or are we talking about the strategics? And are you serving customers in the US or worldwide? I'm fascinated to know about your customer base.
About 60% of our client base are startups.
Okay.
So this is often a physician that came up with an idea that got a round of funding, is working on the next round of funding. They may have got a seed funding, Series A, Series B. That's typically where they find us. We have about 40% of our client base are strategics or large companies that are publicly traded, that have a portfolio of products. From an international perspective, about 60% of our companies are based out of the United States. The other 40% are international, and that is Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia, and then the Middle East, in that order, I would say. It's a lot of companies internationally trying to come to the United States for FDA clearance, but we also work with companies in the United States going to Europe for MDR clearance, or companies in the United States trying to go to China for the clearance over there, and same thing in Korea and other locations.
Do the larger companies have their own department to look at this? And I'm just wondering, is this like, it must be difficult to look at your baby and call it ugly, right? So is it difficult for the company that produced this great kit to say, and now let's attack it, right, from all angles? Do you need that degree of separation to be able to do that work?
I'll say a couple things with that.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity for medical devices wasn't really mandated until a couple years ago. We have some large companies, like publicly traded companies in our portfolio, that have a massive enterprise environment, thousands and thousands of employees, so they have IT cybersecurity staff. They tried to have the IT cybersecurity staff do the product security. It did not work because they didn't have a cybersecurity division, because it wasn't mandated last time they did a submission. But now it is. So they tried to have IT security work on the products, but it's, like I said, it's a very different skill set. It didn't work. Then they would call us in and we would help them. And we have to realize, just because a large company, we would think they have this expertise, and they have some of it, and they have a lot of it, but it wasn't really required until a couple years ago. So if they're only releasing a product every 2 years, the last time they released a product, cybersecurity wasn't really looked at that much. Like one of our largest clients, the last time they released a product was like 2.5 years ago. It went through no problem. We told them you have to do all these things for your submission. They said, no, we don't. We did it before and it worked fine. So they ignored us, even though they hired us to help advise them. They submitted, they got it rejected. And like, oh, we didn't know we had to do all these things. It's like, well, things have changed since the last time you did a submission, but they still didn't want to listen just because they didn't realize that things had changed that much. But yeah, cybersecurity is now, it's now like the number one reason medical devices are getting rejected is because of cybersecurity. It used to be biocompatibility, now it's not cybersecurity.
Do you have a bunch of young hackers sitting in their bedroom drowning in Red Bull cans? Or
I was wondering which profile you are hiring, and
exactly,
if anyone from the MedTech industry could apply for a job.
That's in the movies, right?
You have to be a nerd sitting there hacking.
That's in the movies. You always, there's the guy, they go find him in his bedroom, and mum is downstairs shouting at him, and he goes off and saves the world with our hero.
Stop watching TV.
I know, I watch too much TV. That is true. So tell us about the profile of the people.
Personality type that likes to do the hacking.
Right.
I try not to hire those types of people because at some point
the swordfish kind of people
has to interact with our clients. So I want to make sure they have emotional intelligence.
Very important.
I mean, that's some of the dumb tax I paid in my first company. I had this one guy, he couldn't really talk to the people, so I had to have a handler assigned to him to be the proxy. And I'm like, this is not very scalable. There's got to be a way to find super smart people that also have emotional intelligence. So I wrote a book about that and changed how I hired people. So now it's required on my team. If you like to type on the keyboard and like to be a nerd and live in the basement, that's fine. But you also have to be able to talk to people.
Right.
It's funny. Christian, you mentioned several times that you help companies to get approval. But what is the biggest post-market risk companies underestimate once the device is already on the market?
I think the fact that a lot of people think only in terms of pre-market submission. But now the regulatory bodies are demanding that you have a plan for post-market management. And they look at that plan to see if it's solid. So the next step, though, is once your device is cleared and on the market, you have to implement that plan. And I think that's the area a lot of people struggle with because we talked about the software bill of materials. We talked about risk a little bit. Part of that plan requires continuous monitoring of the software bill of materials because you may have version 1.3 of the authentication software we talked about, and it may have a low risk today, but then tomorrow, a hacker somewhere in Russia, let's say, found a new way to crack that open and bypass the authentication. So now it one day from a low risk to maybe a high risk. So now it's something you have to fix. So that's why we have to continuously monitor the software. We have to have a portal where if someone notices something is broken or there's a vulnerability, they can report it. There's all these requirements. I think it's still like that kind of one and done mindset. Okay, we're cleared. We don't have to worry about cybersecurity anymore. But as I mentioned earlier, cybersecurity is an iterative process from design of your product all the way to getting rid of the product and disposal of the product. Because the time we ask the HDO or we phase out the product, like how do they sanitize it and get rid of sensitive data before they just throw it away in the garbage? Like what does that process look like? As an example, we have to consider the whole life cycle.
Yeah, and it was a much simpler day in the past. I remember having to do a recall on a cardiac output monitor, and we 2,500 of them in Europe, and this was 15, 20 years ago. We couldn't find them all. We actually found 3 on eBay. But it tells you how things have changed.
No, that was a major problem. That's that disposal aspect. If you didn't have a way to encrypt the data on a drive, if the healthcare delivery organization just decided to get rid of your device and you can give them instructions, now you have 1,000 patient records on that device that somebody could buy it off of eBay and steal their medical history.
Yes, absolutely. So what does the future look like? Looking 3 to 5 years ahead, what's the threat landscape, do you think? And is it going to be exponentially growing? What's your thoughts there?
I think it's in a couple areas. One is AI. There's this big push to use AI for diagnostics and therapeutics. I'm not sure we're completely ready for that. Maybe for things like diagnostics with image enhancement to look for vascular disease or very specific use cases, I think AI serves a purpose. But we're trying to use AI for things like therapy, for like a chatbot to substitute going to an actual physical counselor or therapist. You can chat with the therapy bot, and those things have gone wrong. We've had cases where a suicidal patient was chatting with the therapy wellness app. After a couple months, it told the patient to go ahead and kill themselves. Now, obviously, that was a use case the developers of this product didn't think about, because we always think in terms of AI, like when it gets things right. But from a security perspective and a patient safety perspective, we also have to consider like what happens if it gets things wrong? What is the impact to the patient? So we're trying to push AI a little too quickly in those areas. And the second aspect is with autonomy, like autonomous robots, autonomous surgical robots. There's a drive to get to that point, which I think will really help humanity, because now you can have a robot in a surgical theater and all over the world without relying on the availability of a physician. But then also on the flip side, what happens if these things are compromised? Can I harm a patient? Can I kill a patient? And I think we'll be there in 5 years, I'm sure. But we have to proceed with caution, though, because right now the physician can still intervene if something happens to that robot. If it's doing surgery by itself, there's nobody to intervene. So what are the guardrails and what are the use cases if things go wrong, and how are we going to manage that and mitigate the risk?
You have worked with a lot of MedTech companies, teams. In your view, what distinguishes organizations that handle cybersecurity well from those that consistently struggle?
I think it's when the innovator, the founder, takes ownership of the cybersecurity and understanding what it's about and decides early on to be proactive. We have some great clients that came to us in the design phase, and we were able to guide them through things, and they had zero problems with their submission and zero redesigns and no frustration. But their founder and CEOs were very proactive. They're like, okay, what are all the things we have to consider for our product? Sterility, biocompatibility, regulatory strategy, reimbursement strategy, but also cybersecurity. So they had done the work to figure out my device meets the requirements for cybersecurity, so I need to start thinking about it now. And they take ownership of that. I think one of the biggest problems is founders will often just tune out about cybersecurity because as an industry, we've made it horribly complicated and mundane to listen to. So it's easy just to tune out. And then when you have to tune in, it's like too late, or you rely on somebody else to tune in. But as an owner of a business, I have to understand marketing. I have to understand sales. I have to understand the risk to my business in my specific niche. So I would naturally try to get better at those things. And if I think I'm bringing a product to market, it is the founder, the owner, or the CEO's responsibility to understand those risks and have a plan to mitigate those risks.
It's so important. I mean, people know I work in robotics right now, and Silke and I have worked on another robot in the past. I've got to say that this is something that crosses my mind that I think about literally every day, right? When I'm working, even on weekends, is, the safety and security around our device, and something that I'm constantly being asked about by our customers as well. So I think I've learned a hell of a lot, so I really appreciate you coming on today and talking about this absolutely fascinating subject, which is only going to get more and more important as we go forward. But as you've gone through, you talked a little bit about, your dumb tax, but what are the 3 things that you know now that you wish you had known back then?
Well, like you said, I've paid a lot of the dumb tax, painful dumb tax a lot of times. So I would say the first one is pick a mission you'd fight for.
Right.
So with me, I am personally behind our mission. It's much more valuable, I feel, than protecting someone's credit card information online.
Yeah.
Because without the device, a medical device, I wouldn't be here. And I see the impact these devices have on people's lives. So it's a mission that keeps me up, makes me want to fight for. I think that's something, especially as a business owner, if it's hard for you to believe in your mission and there's a tough day, it's hard to keep going sometimes. I think the number 2 would be to build systems and not heroics. So from a scalability perspective, I'm trying to scale my business. I cannot scale my business by having somebody save the day all the time. I have to have robust systems that allow us to scale without us constantly putting out fires or having to hire the hero to save the day. So I think that is important. And the third one, I think, is to choose clients and teammates who share your values. A lot of the friction I've had in the past were because I chose the wrong client. Not every prospect makes a good client. The ones that are typically full of friction during the sales cycle are going to amplify that once you bring them on as a client. So it's hard to say no sometimes, but I've had to develop the ability to say, this is going to cost us a lot of time and a lot of frustration. And the same thing with my team. I want to make sure anyone I bring on my team shares my values. Like I mentioned earlier, I can't have the guy in the room that never talks to anybody, because in our industry, we have to communicate the findings. We have to communicate how to remediate things we found. And I need somebody that can handle that communication, that has the high IQ, but also the high EQ. And I used to think you couldn't find those two, that they're diametrically opposed, but I've somehow been able to find those two.
Cash, do you allow me to ask a final question after our final question?
Okay, on this one occasion.
Final.
Because I think for people who are still listening, they got excited, right?
Yes.
And they are MedTech people normally. Is there a chance for us who are working in MedTech to apply for a job in your company, or is it really like something completely different?
There's definitely a chance for people that are in MedTech to apply for my company, because it's interesting. In my organization, you've got the regulatory aspect, which MedTech people understand. You've got the cybersecurity aspect, which cybersecurity people understand. So I need both skill sets, right? And I ideally have a blend of those skill sets. I just hired somebody not too long ago to help with business development that understands the industry, because one of the biggest challenges is understanding the industry. Like, what is a strategic? What is a biocompatibility study? What is a Series A and B funding? There's all these things people throw around in the industry that is challenging to understand. Like, what is an in vitro diagnostic system, right? What is a class 1, class 2, class 3 device? It's full of terminology, almost more so than the cybersecurity aspect. So there's definitely an opportunity, and we're looking to expand globally. So if anyone is interested, they can certainly reach out to me at Blue Goat Cyber or on LinkedIn.
We will put a link to your website.
Now, if people like me who have been fascinated by this topic and subject, you actually have a podcast that's dedicated to this, right? So your podcast is called?
It's called the Med Device Cyber Podcast.
And where can people find it?
In our link.
Apart from our link?
Or you can search on YouTube, our website, Spotify, Apple. Yeah. I think
all the usual places.
I don't think we have as many as you. I think you've got quite a few episodes. I think we just released episode 56.
Wow, fantastic. Well, I think this episode has had it all, as we said, drama, comedy, edutainment, suspense. So we really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you coming on talking about this. This is something that, as I said, I think about every day. Your company is so focused on this. If you're if you're developing a medical device, whether you're small or a big company, you need someone to do discovery and proper risk assessment and develop a mitigation strategy. Blue Goat Cyber is clearly the company to go and talk to. And I do believe that, sometimes you can be very close to your product and very much proud of it, but you need an external party to come along and kind of beat it up somewhat, just to test it, just to make sure that at the end of the day, the patients are safe. What it's all about. Thank you so much, Christian. for coming on and talking to us about this fascinating subject.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
appreciate the invite and enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for tuning into our MedTech Lives. You have been listening to Zilka Rima and Tash Ikram. We're committed to bringing you insights and stories that inspire and inform the medical community. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network.